Good morning, everyone. I am Stephen Bradford, one of the instructional design managers. I have Saloma Sion, the other instructional design manager, here with me today, as well as Sarah Ratliff from the Disability Access Center here at Harold Washington College. We will be presenting to you today our third series, which is making on accessibility, which is making PDFs accessible, Microsoft Word and PowerPoint accessible documents. So using PowerPoint, if you have PowerPoints for your course, how to make them accessible as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who's going to give you guys some more information. We are recording this session, so you can go back and review this if you need to.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay, good morning. My name is Sarah. Thank you for joining me today for our final seminar. With our final session, I would like to walk you through the steps for making your PDF, Microsoft Word, and PowerPoint documents accessible to your students. So we're going to start with PDF. Now, PDFs or portable document format are widely used. There are numerous devices that our students use to access those files. And these files are easy for a lot of students to use. And if you're getting documents from, say, the publisher, they're more than likely going to give you a PDF file to work with. Now, because there's so many applications that create PDFs, my suggestion would be to check your PDF in Adobe Reader, which is the free version of Adobe Acrobat that's usually pre-installed on most devices. Or if it's not installed, it's freely downloadable from Adobe's website. And that way you want to make sure that your created PDF will appear the way you want it to. Because if your students are going to come into the campuses to view the PDF files and they're going to use the school computers, more than likely they're going to use Adobe Reader to view that. And you want to just make sure that everything's appearing the way you want it to. So you can feel free to use any third-party programs you want to, but just give it that final double check to make sure that the page from one app is being emulated the way that you truly want it to be. And that's basically for usability for the students. Now, again, most of our computers in the campuses have Adobe Reader, which is the free version of Adobe Acrobat. And beginning with version 10, there is a feature that's called Read Aloud. And that feature allows for a PDF to be read aloud to a student via the speakers or headset that the student is using. And when it reads that document aloud, if you have recognized that text, which I'll show you how to do that accessibility part, it will read the text and anything that you have tagged. So if there's any pictures, any charts or graphs, you can have that information read in the proper format. That feature was originally only available if you had Adobe Professional. So now it's freely available if you have Reader, at least Reader 10 or higher. And you'll have some visually impaired students that may instead want to use a PDF file to enlarge text on their screen. So whether it's going to be on a desktop or laptop, or if it's going to be on another device such as a tablet or even their cell phone if they're traveling. And the ability to allow that text to be zoomed in um, can allow them to access that information, and they can enlarge that text as large as they want to. And they still can use the read aloud feature that's built in. And for some of our students that do use JAWS, and if they're coming into the campuses, more than likely they'll access JAWS on the computers. JAWS can interact with the PDFs. So if you have students that are using accessible technology, those PDFs are accessible with JAWS. Or they can use the read aloud feature separately by having JAWS activate that read aloud feature, and then they can just let Adobe take care of the screen reading, or they can interact with both JAWS and the PDF. So you don't have to worry about that feature. So you just want to make sure that you follow the basic guidelines if you're going to create your PDFs. So again, from our previous two seminars where we talked about accessible links and making sure that you use the accessible color scheme, of course, you want to make sure that a student can actually see that information and there's not a lot of flashing text, because that could um, make them focus on the wrong thing or make your PDF more difficult to read. And if you're using the latest version of Adobe Acrobat, where they have the cloud feature, if you're using Reader, you can always upgrade the accessibility feature. So that is one of the drawbacks. If you want to use the accessibility features, you would have to have an upgraded version of Adobe Reader, or you would have to if you could still find a version of Adobe Acrobat Professional, at least version 10 and above, on a CD, you can use that, or you can use the cloud version of the Adobe Acrobat. Um, if you do use a third-party program for their accessibility features, because students are going to more than likely use Adobe Reader, you just want to double check to make sure that at least in Adobe Reader, which again is free, that the information is coming across the way you want to, so that the text is being read properly. You want to make sure that your diagrams, your charts and graphs are showing up the way you need them to on there. So just give it that final double check. And then what I'm going to do is actually take you through some of the steps of using Adobe Acrobat Professional to create an accessible document. Within this PDF, I did have it do the screen reading, this screen recording, so it doesn't look like it's going to show up, but when you actually download the PowerPoint slide, it will show up on there. It just doesn't like to show up because it's being embedded into the Blackboard Collab. Give me one second.
Right now, we're having Salome trying download or trying to bring up the player to see if we can have it play. If we can't get it to work, then like she said, when you have access to the PowerPoint, you should be able to view it. But we're going to try and see if we can get it to work. Is he playing? Can you hear it?
Okay, so right here we do have the, hold on one second. Let's try to make this a little bit bigger here. Yeah, can you bring it back to the beginning? Okay, so this is a screen capture where the bookmarks is going to be open and the tools you can open. Under the recognized text, you're going to say in this file so that you can open up your accessibility features. Okay, so we're going to open up the bookmark feature, and then we're going to open up the tools feature. And when you look under recognized text, and if you select in this file, you're going to have some features so that you can decide how do you want the text to be recognized. And once you click OK, what's going to happen is it's going to recognize all the text. And you can just ignore this pop-up because I've already recognized the text for the first page. Now, once this feature is completed, you have the option of going to the action wizard and create accessible PDFs if you want to try your hand at making it more detailed in accessibility. But the first feature at the recognized text is the best one. Now, if you go over to bookmarks, you can bookmark anything that's important there. And those bookmarks will allow a student to bounce around in your document. And at the bottom, you have the tag view. And from there, if you have pictures or graphs, you can also tag that to make it have a detailed description. And up at the view read out loud feature, that's where you're going to have the read out loud ability that's built into Adobe. Now, the first time you access that, if it's not already activated, you're going to hit the view read out loud and activate. And then you're going to do it again, go back to view read out loud, and you can decide if you want to have one page read or if you want to have all the pages read within a particular range or the entire document. So that gives you an idea of if you use that feature, you can actually hear how the document is going to be read to a student. And that also lets you know if the PDF is going in a particular order that you would like it to. Because sometimes you might want it to focus on a charter graph first and then follow the text, in which case you would use the tagging feature and the bookmarking feature, or if you want to change around the importance of the order. And again, with the bookmarking feature, your students are also able to create their own bookmarks. So you can create your bookmarks for the students, and then the students can also create their own extra bookmarks if they need to. That way they can always bounce around within the document themselves. So that's the easiest way to make a PDF accessible. Of course, if you're going to use a really intensive course such as science or math, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because that information is not going to be conveyed if it's intense quadratic equations. Adobe is not going to necessarily understand that something that is x squared is going to have that superscript. So you could then embed your own voice within PDF with extra features. Because Adobe will recognize just the regular text, but you'll have to go in and put a little bit of somewhat extra efforts so that it knows that this particular equation is important. So here's how I want you to read that out loud to the student. Or you can add block that off as more of a picture, and then you can add a special description that describes what's going on in that document. And that's something that I also go through when I get a math book from the publisher, and I have to decide how I'm going to reconvey that information, especially if it's usually I'll have to take the PDF and go to Microsoft Word because those equations are not going to show up properly when they're being read aloud from Adobe because it's just really looking at regular text. All right. Uh-oh. Give me 1 second. All right.
Would you like to show? So, are there any questions about what she covered a few minutes ago? What we're going to have her do is to bring it up live so she can show you where she went and just kind of go over it really quickly. Not in too much detail, but just kind of show you where she went. Like I typed earlier, we are aware that not everyone has Adobe Professional. So you may have to either look up online to see if there are ways that there's other PDF, either what do you call those software or programs that will allow you to switch over your documents to accessible or make your documents accessible. I think there are some free things available. I'm not sure how well they work. I know the one that we use here is Adobe Professional, which is easier for us. Someone posted here, Ronnie posted that you can get Adobe Professional from the Academic Superstore, and she got a discount, but she said that was years ago.
Okay, so we have a PDF document opened up in Adobe Professional. And the features that I was going over is right here, we have what's called the bookmarks. It'll be a second icon on the left. And this is where you can open up that bookmark. And with this little icon, it looks like a ribbon. It'll say new bookmark. That's where you can add your bookmarks. And what I usually do is open up the bookmarks early so that I don't have to do that later. And then I go over to the right-hand side to tools. Now, in Adobe Reader free version, you'll have some tools. You'll have a tool icon, but you won't have nearly as many options available to you for the tools. So once you have the tools open, the easiest method is to go to the text recognition, and then you're going to go to the first option in this file. Now, before you click this, keep in mind if it's a very long document, it's going to take a long time. So if there's only a particular page you want, you'll be able to choose that option. But typically, if you're going to choose a PDF file and if it's going to have anything over 10 or 15 pages, it does take a moment of patience. And the best thing to do is to let it run in the background and not use the computer, because if you're using a computer as well as trying to have Adobe rasterize the file, it's going to slow down the process. So this is only 4 pages. So if we select in this file, we have our pop-up that says recognize text, and this is where you can choose all pages if you're on a particular page that you want, or if you want a select range of pages. Now under settings, it'll give you what the current settings are, and this is where you can change them by selecting edit. And depending on what type of document you have and what language it is, you want to choose the primary OCR language, so that if it is in mostly English, but it does have foreign language in there, you still want to choose English, because that's the majority of the language of that particular document. And then you can go back and check the blocks of text that are in the foreign languages and make sure that it's being recognized correctly that way. And for PDF output style, you want to do a searchable image, because typically if you scan something and save it into a PDF, it usually is saved as an image and not necessarily where it focuses on the text. And this is why you have to go through this extra step of the text recognition, because it's going to take that image and look for any text that it could recognize. Now, to downsample to, I would suggest nothing less than 600 DPI, because the smaller you get, the less quality you'll receive in the end. So the higher the output of the DPI, the better the quality is going to be. If you have an older computer, or if it's a really long document, you can go to 300 DPI, but it's better to have it at 600 so that it's using the highest amount of clarity that it can use. And these settings will be saved for the next time so that you'll be able to look at this quick box and see what your settings are and change it. Once you have your settings complete, you would just select OK. And what might pop up is sometimes the very first page has already had the text recognized. What you can do is it'll let you know what that error is, and it just says the page contains rendered text. So you can just select ignore future errors in this document, and it just applies for this document only. And you can go ahead and click OK. And it's going to run through, and when it's finished, this is mostly text, so usually it's going to take very little time, but if there's charts and graphs in there, it will do the text, and then it's going to hit that graph and see if there's any recognizable text in there, so you're aware of that. If there's images with text written within it, or if there's charts and graphs that has a lot of text or percentages. And once you do that, the text has been recognized, and it's saved for that just means the scalability of how that text is being scanned in the OCR. So you just want it to be the clearest scan that you can possibly get. Yeah, dots per inch. What happens is if you're using PDFs, like I've received a lot of handouts that instructors have used for semesters, and while that page may look very clear, when you scan it, if there's any pixelation that has accumulated over time on that paper, when it's scanned in that optical character recognition program, it's going to pick up on all the little shadings. So it's the same as if you write something down with a pencil and then erase it. Unless you erase it completely, that little shadowing is going to appear. So if you use a higher DPI, it will recognize that. It'll take more time and recognize the text from what looks to be shadowing, and it can tell that if that shadowing is important information or if it's just something that just appears on the page, and it can ignore that. If you do it at a lower DPI, it's going to basically just do a very, very quick scan. It's going to go very quickly, and all of the imperfections that are on that page are going to appear in your final product, and your actual final product will look much, much worse than what you started off with. So the other option that you have, if you felt that you needed to, you could go to the Action Wizard. And this will take you step by step through some other optimizations. And for the Action Wizard, you can use the Make Accessible feature, and that will take you through making your document accessible in different ways. So this actually takes you step by step, so you can see exactly what your program is doing versus the first option where it'll just do everything in the background without your input. So this will let you know that it's going to do some preparation, your language and tag settings, and then it's going to do a final run accessibility check. So it's going to do all these features, and then it's going to double check to make sure that it's accessible based on the options you chose. If it's a more intensive document, like say science or math, this might be the better way to go. But if it's just a regular document, such as this committee meeting document that just has charts and has a chart and table built in, and it's just mostly text, this would be fine to use the first option. And so going back over here to the bookmarks, if you choose new bookmark, this is where you can type in any information you want to. And this bookmark is set for this particular page, so that as you scroll the page down, those bookmarks will follow that particular page. So you can set as many bookmarks as you want to, and your students can also set extra bookmarks as they're reading things. So maybe they stop at something that they know there's going to be on the test. They want to be able to go back to it without going through 20 pages of the file, and they may not know what page number something is on. They can easily go back to that bookmark. And those bookmarks can easily be deleted as well. So they're not permanent bookmarks, as they can be edited by anyone. And the other thing down here, this is where the tags are. This is where you can view and edit your structured PDF formats, so that if you've set tags, if you set tags anywhere in your document, this is where you can easily access them. So if you found a charter graph and you want to make sure that the OCR doesn't recognize any of the text, you've changed that chart to what looks like just an image within the text, so that you can now tag it, and that student can read that special tag, and they know that that information is some type of graphic, whether it's a chart or graph, and they can then read the information that's pertinent to that image. So the other thing, if you go to view and you go to the read out loud feature, if it hasn't been activated for this particular document, the first thing you're going to have to do is activate read out loud. Once you do that, the menu will close on you. You haven't messed up, it's just that's how you have to do it. You have to go back again with view, read out loud. Now this way you can deactivate it, or you can decide if you want to read just this particular page, or if you want to read your entire document. So be careful if it's something that's 10 pages, because it's literally going to go page to page without stopping. Whereas this one, you can read individual pages. So this is the feature that a lot of students will use. They may use JAWS to activate the view read out loud feature, and then they may use Adobe to just read the document itself. If they don't like how Adobe's reading it, then they may use JAWS to override it, because JAWS can read PDF files. So if a student is used to using JAWS, they may just use JAWS to open up the PDF, and then use JAWS to read everything that's on there. So it works in the same way as if you have the read out loud feature, or if you're using JAWS or something similar that's built on the JAWS programming. And then once you make any changes, on there, once you save it, everything is saved for you. So you don't have to go back and redo the same thing each time you open up the document. So there's a lot you can do with Adobe PDFs, but you just have to keep in mind, depending on how you structure your PDF, and if you use other outside programs to create those PDFs, just give it a run through at least Adobe Reader, so that you know that your document is being read in the way that you want that information conveyed to your students. All right, give me 1 second.
Are there any questions that, while she's moving to the next thing, or any questions that you guys may have? We know that this is a lot of information, it's very detailed, and there's a reason why we're giving you this information as so, because we want you to understand that if you're going to put documents in your course, it takes a lot to have them accessible. So we want you to think about what you're putting in your course from this point on, to make sure that you're thinking about accessibility. Some of these documents you can actually get accessible if you're using PDF documents, let's say from the publisher. You can get that stuff already in an accessible format. They will provide that for you. We just have to reach out to the publisher and say, hey, I'm using some of your documents. Can you make sure they're in an accessible format? So not everything you have to do by yourself, and not everything we're asking you to do this semester. That's why we're breaking it up in parts, and we're asking you just this semester to do kind of the easier stuff with the links and the syllabus to make sure that's successful. And then we're going to work from there. You know, it's going to happen over time. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we will get there. Yes, this presentation will be available in the Brightspace Classroom that we're setting up, yes.
And so after using all of that, all of those different tools within Adobe Professional, everything is accessible at that point. Okay, so now we're going to go to Microsoft Word. Now, just like PDFs, this is a very widely recognized and used format. And one of the things that a lot of the publishers will do, especially if I request textbooks from them, is they will usually offer their documents either in PDF or in Microsoft Word. The trend used to be that they would do Microsoft Word first and then give PDFs, as Microsoft Word takes a little bit longer. They now switch to PDFs because all they have to do is scan their individual pages into PDFs and create that file instantaneously. With Microsoft Word, if you're going to make it accessible, there are a few other things that you do have to do. And those a couple of those things you'll have to do is depending on what you're going to create within that Microsoft Word document. So in our previous two seminars, we talked about using hyperlinks and making them accessible with descriptions, also using images and how you would caption them or give them their detailed description or their quick description based on what type of image it is, whether it's going to be just something that's going to be highly conceptual where you're going to need a lot of information, or if it's just decorative, or if you can use something that's pretty simple. And one of the things you want to do is go back and look at those first two seminars, because you also want to make sure that if you're using any type of if you're going to use those images, you still need to make sure that information is with that image. So that description is either attached as an alt text to the image itself, and I'll show you how to do that again briefly. Or if you have the image on your Microsoft Word page, right underneath it, put the description so that that information is contained right with that image in the same page. You don't want it to appear pages down the line, because then that information has been separated, and that will make it more difficult for the student to be able to focus on that concept. And you want to make sure they're not using colors that will clash with each other. So for example, red and green, if someone's red and green colorblind, they're not going to see that text on top of that background image the way that you would want them to. So you just want to make sure that you also look at the accessible color scheme that was also included within the first two seminars. So I'm going to also use charts and graphs. You still have to give a description of what's going on. And the best thing is, if you're going to use a table, to try not to use a lot of formatting. So using the insert table feature that's built into Microsoft Word will give you the bare bones of the information, so you can still change the font size, keeping in mind the accessibility rules, change the text color, but you don't have a lot of extra side labeling and extra fancy colors, because that information is going to get lost. So one of the things we'll look at will be the master syllabus template for one of the courses. Give me a moment. Okay, here's a sample master syllabus for Kennedy King College. And this is a great way to see all of the features that we just talked about. So when you get to the first image, you're going to have the Kennedy King College logo. So that's already a decorative image. There's just basic information that you just need to include. So if you're in Microsoft Word, what you can do is right click on that image. And if you select picture and you go to the alt text, this is where you can put your alternate text. Kennedy King logo. This is a decorative image. That's all the information you need to put there. But once you go further down, you have this image. So now we have to add a little bit more detailed information because it's not just a simple image. So again, selecting the picture, right-clicking, and going to this alt text, you have a little bit more of a detailed description. So once you have that information in there, once you type it up and you select OK, it will save that information with that picture. And if you copy and paste that picture elsewhere within the document, that alt text will also follow. So if you use this picture 3 different times, unless you want to change the information, that information will stay with the picture, provided you're just copying and pasting the already inserted picture around within this Microsoft Word file. If you insert it again directly from the folder, then you're going to have to add that information back in there. You can just go back to the alt text, copy and paste that information, and put that information in there. And if we go further down, here's a great example of using a table. So this is the insert table feature from here. This is more preferable than saying the insert Excel spreadsheet feature, because if somebody doesn't have Excel installed on their computer and they're opening up that document, there's a lot of that information that's going to be lost. But if you use the insert table feature, then that information is just the bare bones of making cells within Microsoft Word. And you still have some availability to do some formatting. I would not have the text go in a vertical format, because when a screen reader is going to read that, depending on if it's an updated screen reader or not, it's not going to know that that text necessarily is vertical text. It's literally going to read each and every letter as if it's on its own separate line, and that might confuse your students. So I would suggest using just the horizontal method. You still can change the format, you still can change the bolding. If you want to do underlines, screen readers will pick up on that. So if you still want to highlight certain words within your syllabus, feel free to do so. The screen readers will still pick up that information. It'll say that this word is underlined, this sentence is underlined, there's an emphasis on this word. So if you bold it, if you put a bullet point, it will recognize that information. Don't think there's anything more in here. Okay. So another thing you can do with Microsoft Word is you can, if you have the professional version, or if you're using a third-party application to create your PDF, you can create your document in Microsoft Word, and then within that other program, save it as a PDF. If you've made it accessible in Microsoft Word, you can now pretty much guarantee that most of the accessibility has been now saved in to the PDF format, so that when you do that double check of seeing if the text is recognized, and if you want to still add bookmarks, there's less that the program is going to have to do. So you still can create your Microsoft Word documents and later on decide, oh, this will make a great PDF. And usually, sometimes that will make a document bigger or smaller, but with Brightspace, you have 1 GB of upload availability. So you won't run into an issue size-wise. But just in case it's something that you want to email to your students, you may want to try saving it in the opposite format, because sometimes it'll compress it just enough so that you can use that to email to your students, as long as it doesn't go over the size limit for whatever email client that student is using. All right, give me one more second. Do you have any questions for me for Microsoft Word? Okay, we'll move on to our final presentation with PowerPoint. So with PowerPoint, you can be super creative, and I'm pretty sure that many of you have received PowerPoint slides in excess of 80 slides or more from the publisher, with all of the fancy formatting that they've done, with all of the extra images they've added in there, charts and graphs, and embedded audio and video. So there's a lot that you can do with PowerPoint slides. The only drawback that if you're creating your own slides that you will notice is that if you have an image on a slide, you need to have a description with that image on that same slide. So just so that information flows with that image. Now, the image doesn't have to take up the entire screen. So it could be a smaller image, and that student can then decide if they want to zoom in on the slide to see the more finer details of the information on that particular image. But if you have that description, their screen reader is just going to pick up on that description for either your chart, your graph, your picture, whatever your image is, it's going to pick up that information and read it to the student. So if you want to spread that detail out over multiple slides, feel free to do so. You don't have to put everything on all of your images on one slide. That actually makes it a little bit easier, especially if a student is not using a screen reader, but instead they want to use the zooming feature on PowerPoint to make that text bigger or make that image bigger. And if there's a whole lot of information going on, a lot of pictures on one slide, they may miss out on some important information. And the one thing I did was this time I did use a background, sort of like a background border color, just to show you that you can use you can make your design for your PowerPoint slides in different colors. What happens is because of the different shadings of green, if this was printed out, it would just print out in different shades of grayscale. So that's fine. It's just that most of the text is going to be on that white background. So that's why I chose having a border color on the side versus having the whole background as a particular color. If you want to use that, just refer back to the accessible color scheme. And again, that um, handout that I included shows you the best ways to use the background color and how you want to use the text on top of it in coordinating colors. So use the same rules if you're choosing how you want to design your PowerPoint slides, because there are some great built-in colors on here, but again, they may not be, there's a lot of them that aren't accessible necessarily color-wise, or it's just so much going on in the background. If a student is going to enlarge that slide and there's a, like sort of like a watermark in the background, they may think that that's part of the text, or it could obscure some of the text. So just be aware of that. And for those that are going to also embed videos, just double check and make sure that they actually uh, are still valid and they actually will play. And what you also want to do is, depending on how you're embedding the video, make sure you include the hyperlink for that video, because sometimes that video may crash within Brightspace. Sometimes you just may, if they download the PowerPoint slide, they'll be able to see that information because they can directly go to that hyperlink and see that video or hear some embedded audio that's on there. But you also want to include that hyperlink. That's something you definitely want to give to the students, just in case it crashes within the PowerPoint slide itself. That is all that I have. Possible example.
So we definitely have, Ronnie, we definitely have an example of the PDF one. Um, I think that Sarah can make a quick video for the Word in the PowerPoint as well. But I will let her answer that question. But we can put those in the course.
Yeah, I can definitely do that as well.
Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes. Rosabelle, that is correct. They do. So just remember as we move forward with this accessibility project here, that we need you to make sure that all of your HTTP links in your course have descriptive links before them, or you can remove the HTTP link and insert a descriptive with the link behind it. And also make sure that any images that you have in your course, that you have alt text. Please do not use a lot of descriptive images if you don't need to. Try to minimize that because students don't need to go through a lot of information with a screen reader having a saying descriptive, or decorative image, decorative image, decorative image. So if you don't need the image, go ahead and remove some of those images. Um, but if you need to have them there, or you really need to have it decorative, then you can use it there. Make sure you label as decorative and or use alt text. If there are no questions, comments, or concerns, we appreciate you guys coming today. Hopefully, you guys got some information. Again, we will provide resources for all of this, so you don't have to remember it all. We just want to expose you to it and really have everyone understand what it means to have their course accessible. So this is the third presentation. I don't know whether we're going to do another one before the end of the semester, but we will continue doing these through the summer as well as the fall semester to make sure that everyone is getting the information that they need to make sure their course is accessible. Are there any questions? Any additional questions, comments, or concerns? If not, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate it. And we will see you at the next professional development.